Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing the worst books that I read in 2023. Before I get started, if you're new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe below as well as the notification bell. And if you're new, hi, hello, I'm Stephanie and I do love bookish content. Before I get started, I do want to say this is not just the worst books, but it's also the most disappointing books. So it's like the worst or disappointing books I read. So it could be ones that I thought would be amazing and end up being like very mediocre, etc. But generally these ratings are all like 1, 2, 2.5 stars reads for me. I don't want to say it was like super easy to find 10 books, but it was not difficult to find 10 books, if that makes any sense. But yeah, let's just go into all the books that I thought would be either fucking amazing and they weren't, or they were just absolutely trash. Also, this is in no particular order. The first book I want to talk about is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. I thought this book would be so fucking good. It basically follows a woman who goes back to Malaysia where she ends up like starting to hear the spirit of her grandmother, and she ends up getting involved with like exorcism and these local deities, etc. And I don't know, I had struggled so much with this book, guys. I also felt like the concept would have been so fascinating, but unfortunately the execution and the character just did not do it justice for me. I also think I listened to an audiobook, which I feel like should have been fine because there's no real like fantasy element except for like talking to spirits in a way, but that's very much more like urban fantasy. It's more like epic fantasy that I can't get into when it comes to audiobooks because I'm learning a whole new magic system, a whole new world, etc. And this one didn't apply to any of that. So I was like, should be okay. Unfortunately, I felt like the narrator did a terrible job with narrating, especially with the tones and the accents. So I was very distracted for most of the book because I was just like, what the fuck is happening here? And yeah, I was not a fan, guys, unfortunately. I did also think I read this book when I also read Witch in the Star, which was my favorite book of the year, like one of my favorite books. I did talk about that in my top 10 books that I read for 2023. I'll link that above and down below. So I read the same book in that same video, so I'll link that also above and down below to check it out. So the dichotomy was insane because 5-star read, and then this was like a 1 or 2 star read for me. So unfortunately, not the best book. The next book I want to talk about is one that please don't come after me, guys, and that is The Book of Asreal by Amber Nicole. This book was such a disappointment because I thought this would be amazing. Like, so many people were raving about it. I went into it fully expecting like a 4 or 5 star read. Ended up being like 1 or 2 stars for me. It was, I don't want to say trash, but it was not great. The writing was so dense. I didn't care for the characters. I didn't care for the chemistry. I felt like it was very forced. Yeah, I was not a fan overall, guys. So whoever said it was so good and all the Goodread rating that gave it like 4.5 stars, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I did not get that sense at all. And even now I'm looking at this book and I'm just like, I don't understand. So unfortunately, this was not it for me. And obviously, I would not be continuing on with the series. I believe this is a duology. The next book on here is Banyan Moon by Phao Tai. This is a book that I read for my book club. Unfortunately, I was like 1 out of 2 people who read it because everyone just did not get into it. They started and was just like, no, or like they just were not interested. So like I said in my wrap up that I did for I think November, this was not it for me. I really didn't care for the story. I didn't care much for the characters. Usually I do like generational saga because it does follow the grandmother, the mom, and the daughter, but I felt like it was all very confusing to me. And I also listened to an audiobook, which again should not be an issue because it's not fantasy, but like I feel like the narrator didn't do a good job with making the 3 characters very distinct from each other in terms of the characters, in terms of like the personalities. Like, they just seem very bland. So unfortunately, this was not great. It says over here like heart-shatteringly beautiful. I'm sorry, but that was not the case for me at all. Next book on here is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Call. Unfortunately, this was absolute trash. I did talk about this. I think I read this for one of my reading vlogs a while ago, and yeah, it was terrible. This was also a novella, so it was already off to not the greatest start because I generally don't really like short stories. I feel like by the time I get into the story, it's done and you're just like, what's happening? You're also like thrust into it so quickly because there's not a lot of time for the author to really build up the story. So you're just like, what is happening? You just throw it into this whole situation and then sudden climax hits and you're done. And even after reading this book, I was just like, I don't understand the point of this book. I don't understand like what did you learn from this? I learned nothing. I didn't care for the story. Like, there's a scary ass person here, but other than that, like, nothing about the story really stood out for me, unfortunately. The next book on here is The Last of August, which is part of the Sherlock Holmes series. I believe this is book 2. Recently, I feel like I'm not picking a lot of YA books anymore, just because I feel like I'm growing slowly out of it. But I still really enjoy YA thrillers, and I've read a couple amazing ones the past year or two, and so this one sounded really good. It's supposed to be like Sherlock Holmes, but like generations after, and it's kind of like a gender bender version because it's Sherlock Holmes. And I thought it was going to be very similar to Good Girl's Guide to Murder or something similar along those lines. I didn't like this book at all. Like, I thought it would be similar to Truly Devious too, where they're all like a female detective, you know, a girl just trying to solve mysteries. And I feel like the banters that they had in other books was not seen in this one, and so I didn't care much for her. I didn't care much for her sidekick Watson. I didn't care much for the mystery that they were trying to solve. Like, nothing really stood out to me. So I did try to read both books. I think the first one was slightly better, but it wasn't amazing. I really should not have picked up the second book because I felt like my expectations did not get any higher, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, I felt like the series was very mediocre, and I ended up just did not finishing the rest of the series. This next one on here is also the one that please don't come after me, and that is Hooked, because I did not like for this one at all. I heard so many amazing things about this book, and then my friend read it and she was like, no, this book is not for her. And I was like, I don't know, because I feel like sometimes with romances, her taste is very different from my taste. So I was like, maybe it'll still be okay. I heard so many other people talk about it and rave about it, and then I read it and I was like, no, you're right, this book absolutely trash. Like, it was so bad. I didn't care for the romance. I didn't care for the characters. I think I gave it 1 or 2 stars. It was not great. I was like, people were like, oh, this book is so smutty. Like, where's the smut, guys? It was like maybe 2 scenes out of the entire book that had like something smutty. Everything else was just like lackluster dialogue, not great banter, the characters very mediocre. Like, I don't really see the plot. Like, nothing about the book was great. So unfortunately, absolute trash and such a disappointment overall. Next book on here that I thought would be amazing would be Violet Made of Thorns. Unfortunately, that was not the case because this book was such a disappointment. It wasn't trash though. Like, I thought it was okay of a read, but I had such high expectations because I heard so many people talk about it. Even my friend, the same friend who didn't like Hooked, she really enjoyed this book. So I was like, you know what? Let me give it a shot. And then I read it and I was like, I don't know. And this is what I mean by sometimes when like we don't have very similar tastes, because she loved this one, I did not care for it. But then there'll be other instances where she like didn't care for a book like Hooked, and I also agree with her. So I can't say we have similar tastes or not similar tastes because they vary so much. So sometimes when she says she loves a book or hates a book, I still have to try it out for myself because I never know. But this book was definitely one that I did not agree with her. I felt like the characters were just okay. The pacing was so slow, and when I finished it, I was just like, I don't know why I finished it. So I probably should have DNF'd this book, to be honest. The next book on here is The Witch of Willow Hall. This one was one that I got a couple years ago, and I remember it had a lot of great reviews. A lot of people were raving about it at that time, so I picked it up, or I purchased a copy. Did not pick it up at that time, and I finally got to it this year. Unfortunately, it did not live up to all expectations I heard because I found it very slow and very boring. I didn't care much for the characters. I didn't care much for the plots. I thought it was just very mediocre at best. So this is yet another disappointing read for me this year. Next book on here is one that, oh my god, like all of my book club members hated this book, and that is Veno. I don't know why this was nominated as like best fantasy or best debut of this year. It did not win, thank god, because when we all saw it on there, we were just like, Veno's on there. What the fuck? Like, what the actual fuck? Because this book was so bad. Like, it was atrocious. It's probably like the worst book of the year if I had to rate something, because it was that bad. Like, the writing was horrendous. The pacing was awful. There were so many times when the author was just like writing and she would just like whiplash you in terms of like different timelines and different places, and you're just like, one sentence ago you were somewhere else, and you're just like, there was no break in between. There was no like indication that there was gonna be like a time jump or like a scene change or something like that. It was just very like, I don't know, it was just not great. The writing was not great. It was terrible. We also did find out later that the author is more known for writing script, so I feel like maybe for like a script it would have been okay, because there would be like little like parentheses like going to this place or whatever it is, like they turned or something, like directional script or something. So maybe like in that sense it would have been okay, but like as a book, not the greatest. And I can safely say that none of my book club members liked this book at all. We all thought it was absolute trash. All right, then my last and final book, guys. I feel like I've just been like ranting and venting about these books, but this one is White Ivy. I remember thinking that the premise was gonna be really good for this book because it follows a woman, her name is Ivy Chen, where she went to this prestigious school and then she ended up attracting the attention of this golden boy. But then like something happens and she ends up like breaking off with this guy due to circumstances of her own mother, and years later now we follow her as a grown adult, and she ends up bumping into the sister of the golden boy that she dated all those years ago. And so she feels like maybe this is fate, and she's just hoping that maybe she can rekindle this relationship with this golden boy because he's rich, he's wealthy, because she also grew up with her grandmother who was teaching her to like be a thief and a liar. And then as the story kind of progresses, she ends up in a love triangle, and I don't know, guys, I felt like this book was very messy and not in a good way. I feel like sometimes like messy drama is fun, but this was written in a way that was supposed to be very like poignant and memorable and like, you know, like finding a lot of wisdom in here, and I feel like that was not the impression that I got after reading this book. I just felt it was very messy and just a lot of drama, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here, and it was not good drama either. So unfortunately it was not a great book for me. I remember thinking it would be really good, but that was not the case. So anyways, these are unfortunately all the books that I read this year that I was honestly very disappointed by or absolutely hated. Some of them I had amazing expectations for, and others I was like whatever, and then I read it and I was like, what the fuck did I just read? So that is quite unfortunate, to be honest. But let me know down below if you have read any of these books before, and if you have, like, what did you think about it? Do you agree with my sentiment about these books, or are you going to defend yourself for liking it? Because I'm curious, like I would love to know the people who enjoyed it, because clearly I was not the right audience for some of these. And if you had read any other books in 2023 that you absolutely hated, I want to say tell me down below, but also don't tell me, because I feel like I probably wouldn't read it then. You know what I mean? So anyways, at the end of the day, that's all to say for this video. As always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. And if you like to see more content of me, please don't hesitate to subscribe down below, as well as hit the notification bell. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.